You already know you should leave. You have known for weeks, maybe months, maybe much longer than you want to admit. And yet every time you get close to walking away, something happens. They say one soft thing. They look at you a certain way. They give you one calm day after 10 cruel ones. And suddenly you stay. Not because it is healthy, not because it makes sense, because something deeper is happening inside your brain. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. And if you have ever asked yourself, why can I not let go of someone who is hurting me? This is where the answer begins. Because toxic attachment is not built on love. It is built on unpredictability. And unpredictability is one of the most addictive forces the human brain can experience. Think about a slot machine. People do not get addicted because it pays every time. They get addicted because it pays randomly. The next pull might be the one. The next moment might be different. The next reward might finally come. That is exactly how many toxic relationships work. One day they are cold, dismissive, cruel, emotionally absent. Then suddenly they become warm, attentive, affectionate, almost perfect. And your brain does not read that as instability. It reads it as reward incoming. That is the trap. Because every time the warmth returns, your brain releases dopamine. Not because the relationship is healthy, because the reward was uncertain. And uncertain rewards create stronger cravings than consistent ones ever could. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It is one of the most powerful bonding mechanisms that exists. And once your nervous system adapts to that cycle, you stop craving peace. You start craving relief. That is a huge difference. Because peace is stable. Relief is addictive. A healthy relationship gives your body safety. A toxic one gives your body tension, then temporary release. And if you repeat that long enough, your brain starts confusing relief with love. Read that again in your mind. Relief starts to feel like love. That is why people stay. Not because the relationship is beautiful. Because the pain keeps ending just long enough to make them hope again. And hope, when it is placed inside a toxic cycle, can become a weapon. Now here's where it gets darker. The lower the lows, the stronger the highs feel. Not because the highs are actually amazing, but because your brain is comparing them to suffering. You stop asking, is this relationship healthy? And you start asking, is today better than yesterday? Yesterday was awful, so today feels good. But good is not the same as safe, and relief is not the same as love. If that line hits harder than you expected, that is probably not an accident. Because toxic relationships do not just damage your emotions, they slowly damage your standards. And after enough time, they begin to damage your identity. This is the part most people never explain clearly. Long-term exposure to emotional instability changes the way you see yourself. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The toxic person becomes your reference point. They define what is normal, what is acceptable, what is overreacting, what is your fault, what you supposedly deserve. And after enough repetition, you stop trusting your own internal signals. You do not just question the relationship, you question yourself, your memory, your judgment, your sensitivity, your worth. That is not random. That is psychological conditioning. And once that happens, leaving becomes much harder than outsiders understand. Because now you are not only trying to leave a person, you are trying to leave a reality that your brain has been trained to survive inside. This is where cognitive dissonance takes over. You hold two beliefs at the same time. This person hurts me. This person loves me. Both feel real. Both feel true. And that contradiction creates mental pressure. So your brain looks for the fastest way to reduce the discomfort. Usually not by leaving, by justifying. Maybe they are stressed. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe they did not mean it. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe next time will be different. Every explanation keeps the system alive. Every excuse tightens the loop. And the longer you stay, the more your identity begins to fuse with the relationship itself. That creates another trap, because now you are not only afraid of losing them, you are afraid of losing the version of yourself that exists with them. Even if that version is smaller. Even if that version is anxious. Even if that version is constantly shrinking. It is still familiar, and the human brain will often choose familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. That is one of the hardest truths to accept, because walking away does not only feel like loss, it feels like death to an identity. Then there is the time, the years, the energy, the sacrifices, the apologies, the parts of yourself you kept giving away, hoping it would finally become enough. This is where the sunk cost fallacy locks people in. The more you invested, the harder it becomes to leave. Not because the relationship improved, because leaving forces you to face something brutal, that the investment may never pay off, that the time is gone, that the effort did not save it, that love alone did not fix it, and the mind hates that conclusion. So instead of cutting the loss, it keeps investing. More patience, more forgiveness, more self-betrayal, until one day you are no longer fighting for the relationship. You are fighting to prove the suffering meant something. And underneath all of this, for many people, is the deepest wound of all. They have been taught slowly that this is what they deserve, not in one dramatic moment, in 1,000 tiny ones. A joke that humiliates you, a silence that punishes you, a comment that makes you feel small, a loving moment that arrives only after you break. Repeated often enough that treatment stops feeling shocking. It starts feeling familiar, and people tend to stay in environments that match the way they see themselves, even when those environments are destroying them. That is why willpower alone is usually not enough. You are not dealing with a simple bad decision. You are dealing with a neurological loop, a distorted reward system, a damaged self-concept, a manipulated sense of reality, and an attachment system that was built to keep you connected, not to protect you from harm. So no, you are not crazy for struggling to leave. And no, it does not mean you secretly enjoy the pain. It means your brain adapted to survive something that was never meant to be normal. And that understanding matters, because the moment you understand the mechanism, you stop calling it weakness. You start calling it what it is: conditioning, attachment, trauma, psychology. And psychology can be interrupted, not instantly, not easily, but absolutely. The people who finally leave do not usually do it the day they feel strongest. They do it the day they finally see clearly. They realize they are not leaving a soulmate. They are leaving a system, a loop, a pattern that trained them to accept less, question themselves more, and mistake emotional survival for love. That is the real exit. Not the slam door, not the final text, not the dramatic goodbye. The real exit is understanding what has been happening to you well enough to stop calling it love. If this made you see something you could not explain before, write one word in the comments: clarity. And if you want more videos that break down the psychology behind manipulation, attachment, and human behavior, subscribe. Because once you see these patterns clearly, they become much harder to control you with.